Hello everyone. Today for Chapter 6, I wanted to give you a brief overview of calculating the gross death rate versus the net death rate. The gross death rate is also known as and is often called the hospital death rate, and the net death rate is usually called the institutional death rate. Let's first take a look at the formula for the gross death rate. Remember, this is also called the hospital death rate. So here our formula is the number of inpatient deaths, including newborns, for a given period of time times 100 over the total number of live discharges and deaths, which include adults and children and newborn deaths within that same time period. Before beginning a calculation for the gross death rate, it's important to remember which items are not included when we're making this calculation. So these include DOA patients, dead on arrival patients. Why are these not included in the gross death rate? It's because they were not admitted to the hospital. They were not technically inpatients. So remember, we're talking about inpatients when we're doing this calculation. So dead on arrival patients were never admitted, so they were considered outpatients. The same with ER deaths. Patients who were brought to the emergency room and passed away in the emergency room also were not admitted to the hospital, not inpatients, they're also outpatients. And fetal deaths, another term for fetal deaths, stillborns. This is the death of a fetus before birth, still in the womb. And this also is not used in the gross death rate calculation. Let's go ahead and make a gross death rate calculation based on the following data collected for the month of August. Now, before we begin, I want you to just read through the data that's collected here and sort of get a feel for what they're giving us. So this first line, total A and C discharges, total adults and children discharges, 432. Total adults and children deaths, 8. Now, it's important to note down here, and you will see this in your book, and it makes a difference. It tells us deaths are included in discharges. So that means this 432 includes the 8 deaths. So of all the discharges, of all 432, 8 of that 432 were deaths. Let's go on down the list here. Total newborn discharges, 84. Total newborn deaths, 2. Again, this 84 discharges, of the 84, 2 of them are newborn deaths. Then we also have data here about fetal deaths at 3, emergency room deaths at 9, and dead on arrival patients at 10. So first, let's take a big picture view. Let's remember what's not included when we're calculating a gross death rate. So we know from our textbook and from the previous slide that fetal deaths, ER deaths, and DOA patients, remember these have never been admitted, they've never become inpatients, so they're not included in our calculation. So it's important to make that distinction and know what to include in your calculation and what not to include. So these numbers we can disregard. They're not going to play into our calculation. So let's go ahead and walk through this for the gross death rate. So if you remember, our numerator is the total number of inpatient deaths, including newborns, for a period for our August. So we have 8 adults and children and 2 newborn deaths. So we will have 8 plus 2. So 8 inpatient deaths, including newborn, for a period times 100 over the number of live discharges including adults and children and newborn deaths. So it's discharges plus deaths for both adults and children and newborns. Now remember, we talked about before, the deaths are included in the discharges. So these two numbers are already included here. So all we need to do is bring down the 432 plus 84. This will give us 10 times 100 is 1,000 over 516. 1.937. Let's go ahead and round that percentage to to 2 decimal places. 1.94% is our gross or hospital death rate. Now let's go ahead and talk about the net death rate, or that institutional death rate. This is very similar to the gross death rate calculation, except the net death rate, it excludes deaths under 48 hours after admission. So this is your key in this calculation, is making a distinction between deaths before and after 48 hours after admission. So here we have the total number of inpatient deaths, including newborns, minus the deaths that happened under 48 hours for a time period, times 100, over the total discharges, including newborns again, minus deaths less than 48 hours for that same time period. So here we have data collected for the month of September. Again, let's look big picture first. What do we have going on here? We don't have any fetal deaths, DOA, or ER data listed here, so we don't need to worry about excluding that right now. It isn't included in our data set, so that's good. We don't have to worry about it. I do want you to note here, though, unlike our last calculation, here it says that this data, discharges do not include deaths. So what they're saying is we have live discharges and we have deaths, which are also discharges. So the total discharges here for A and C would be what, 618, but they've separated it out to help us with our calculation here. So just making that distinction, just make sure when you're looking at a data set, does that discharge number include the deaths or not? In this case, it does not. So let's go ahead with our net death rate calculation. So first of all, we begin with our numerator, remember, the total number of inpatient deaths, including newborns. So we know we had 12 and 4. So we had 16 inpatient deaths minus the deaths that happened less than 48 hours for that particular time period. So of this 12, 5 happened within that first 48 hours, and for the newborns, 3 happened within that 48 hours. So the 3 plus the 5 is 8. So 16 minus 8, that's going to be our numerator times 100. Then for our denominator, we need to find the total number of discharges, including newborns. So our total discharges, remember, here, discharges do not include deaths. So we have to make sure we include all discharges, and we know that deaths are technically discharges. So here, 606 plus 12 is going to give us 618 A and C discharges, plus the newborn discharges, the 79 plus the 4 is 83. Then we continue down here, minus the number of deaths under 48 hours. So here we had 3 and 5, remember, so that's 8. So when we go ahead and work this out, this leaves us to 16 minus 8 is 8 times 100 is 800. Over 618 plus 83 minus 8, 693. This gives us 1.154. We change this percentage to 2 decimal places for our rounding, 1.15%. Good luck with your exercises this week, and as usual, feel free to email me with your questions at any time.